Hello and welcome to the Student Mission Podcast. My name is Mads.
And my name is Ed.
And we're part of the team here at Fusion. And at Fusion, we have a vision to see every student find hope in Jesus and a home in the local church.
So tune in each episode as we chat to students from across the country who are boldly living out their faith and sharing Jesus with their friends.
And we hope that by listening to this podcast, you feel inspired and equipped to reach those around you where you are,
whilst also hopefully having a bit of fun along the way.
Well, welcome to the Student Mission Podcast. We're going to be chatting to a student named Natalie a little bit later in the podcast. But as ever, we like to start with a hot topic question to do with university life.
Yes, we do.
And this week, Ed, we've gone with the question, what is the worst issue you've had with your house or your landlord?
Right.
What was yours like at uni? Is it okay?
So, well, this is definitely a big topic, isn't it? Because student housing, student landlords can have a bit of a reputation, can't they, sometimes? I mean, you get some brilliant ones out there, but then you also have these like housing horror stories where things are definitely not working or things are breaking or maybe the landlord is a less than attentive presence to some of these issues, shall we say. I mean, my housing at uni on the whole was okay.
Yeah.
I think in my second year, we were fortunate because we had quite a good landlord, which was really helpful because it felt like everything in the house was breaking. I think at one point, our cellar got flooded.
No way.
Or semi-flooded, but I don't know how that got resolved. I think it just sort of is resolved itself. Don't know what structural issues that left. We also, some of the extractor fans weren't working. The boiler broke at one point. We had a fridge that wasn't working, but fortunately that all got attended to within like good time. So I don't think we had any huge issues with the housing. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the issues were probably of our own causing. We didn't mow the lawn all year.
You had a lawn? We didn't even have a lawn. I'm impressed.
No, we had a lawn and it was kind of like waist high, midriff.
No way.
So I don't know why we thought we weren't responsible for the gardening, because that is a thing. And so they were like, we've taken that money out of your deposit.
Really?
Yeah, to pay for the garden.
They expected you to mow the lawn?
Yeah, that is like a thing. You're responsible for the upkeep. It was a meadow, effectively.
I see.
It was probably its own ecosystem developing. But we were okay housing-wise. There were no like huge issues or infestations. So
fair enough. I mean, we had the most lovely landlord you could ever imagine. He was so nice and very attentive to things that were going wrong in the house that needed fixing. But the worst thing was, so we lived in the same house second year and third year. Second year, all went home for summer, came back to it, just a huge fly infestation in the whole house. In the bathroom as well. And like, I don't even know why. It's not like there were bins in the bathroom or anything like that. Like it was clean in there, but they're just, I don't know, maybe there was some eggs somewhere and it was just disgusting. I opened that door and I was like, it was like a mob of flies just attacking you. It was crazy. So but I don't think that's the landlord's fault. Is it the house's fault? Maybe.
Well, I would describe that as a terrible issue with the house, a fly infestation.
Yeah, maybe. I don't really know how flies lay eggs. Do they lay them in poo? I don't really know. Anyway.
I don't know enough to be able to sustain a conversation about a fly's reproduction.
I don't know.
We can have a go, but none of it will be accurate.
That's for a different podcast for a different time. Let's hear a couple of responses from some students. This student is called Emily, and this is what she says.
So essentially, in my second year, my landlord was really horrible. I had a medical emergency once and got a little stain on the wall, and he charged me to repaint the entire wall, even after I explained to him what happened and it was completely not my fault. He still charged me. He also sold the house and didn't tell us. After the sale went through, the second landlord upped our rent and we couldn't do anything about it because we weren't told in advance. So yeah, it was just not very good.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't sound great, does it? It feels like things like stains on the wall, unless it was a very dramatic one, they're all just part of wear and tear, aren't they?
Yeah, and I feel like maybe some landlords try and are really cheeky and be like, which is why the inventory is very important, like making sure you're there, taking the photos, so you've got the evidence of what was there and what wasn't. But I mean, it feels like you shouldn't have to do that.
No,
but
But that is top advice for a student moving into second year accommodation out of halls, or even in halls as well. Take photos of everything, because otherwise they can take the mick.
Yeah, because I don't think, sometimes students aren't always around for an inventory check. No,
also true.
Yeah, and you maybe don't know what's about each different room.
Yeah.
I would say that's also a really good question to ask if you're moving into a house for the first time, asking what the landlord is like.
Yeah.
Because the house may be sick or it may be really good, but if the landlord's not, or you feel like not necessarily a trustworthy character, and there are plenty of brilliant landlords out there, but there are also some not great ones. Like the house I was in my third year also got sold midway through, but we were totally aware that was happening.
That's the difference,
that wasn't sprung on us. We, at the end.
Yeah, I was going to say the whole idea with renting is that it is always a risk that the landlord may sell it. So, I mean, I can't argue against the landlord selling a house, but it is how you go about it.
They're allowed to do that.
So they are allowed to do that. Okay, we've got a second one. This is from a student called Jack, and this is what he says.
I think for me, the most annoying thing is our back garden and front garden not being sorted out by our landlord. It is by far the worst issue. It is overgrown. It is absolutely horrible. And we've been sent so many emails by our landlord saying, we'll sort it out, it's fine. And then they don't come. So that is a bit annoying.
So that's interesting. So this landlord is claiming they will do it and it's not their responsibility, but they're not doing it.
Yeah, well, if the landlord's claiming responsibility for it, but isn't doing it. Whereas I think the expectation was with us. It's an issue if they're expecting you to do the gardening, but they don't provide you with any of the tools to do it.
Yeah.
Because, if you haven't got a hedge trimmer or a lawnmower, then you can't get.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why, like most I don't think I've ever been to a student house and looked at the lawn and gone, that is a well-kept lawn.
Never.
I've never been to a student house and been like, wow, look
at that Eden.
Look at that Eden. This tropical paradise.
No.
It's, I think that is an issue. And then it just gets so overgrown. And then,
I can see how that would be frustrating.
I mean, probably great for the local wildlife.
Yeah, so they're rewilding. That's what they're doing.
Exactly.
They're saving the planet.
Maybe that's what the landlords
Every
are doing.
cloud, exactly.
Well, I think some of those housing issues were a little bit traumatic.
Yeah.
But, so our thoughts and prayers are with you if you're having any current issues with your landlord or infestations or mold problems. I mean, we're thinking of you.
Yeah.
But we should probably get into our interview with Natalie. So here is our chat with her. Natalie, welcome to the Student Mission Podcast. It's great to have you here.
It's great to be here. Thanks, guys.
So tell us, where are you studying and what do you study? Yeah, like what does your student life look like at the moment?
I am a university student in Sheffield, at the University of Sheffield, studying architecture, and I'm in my third year at the moment.
Architecture. So that's what, 7 years all
pretty
told?
long.
Is it really?
I actually got told the other day that minimum, like usual, is like 9.5 years. So I was like,
9.5?
No way.
Because you do 3 years, a year of work, and then another 2 years masters, and then another bit at the end. Part one, part two,
longer
part three.
than learning to be a doctor?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you don't get paid as much.
And it's more for architecture.
You've got to be really in it
because
you love
learning?
it.
Why does it take so long?
Great question.
And is this the point where I say, is it interior architecture or exterior architecture? Or is it both?
Both.
Oh.
Yeah, it's just architecture, straight.
Okay. I thought that would make me sound clever.
What's the difference?
No, there is an interior architect.
Okay, I was going to say, well, I guess it takes longer because you want the things you drive on or live in, you want them to be safe, right? And not just collapse.
This is true.
I was thinking it was just houses, but this is architecture of anything.
Yeah, like right now I'm designing hypothetically, designing a bathhouse in Japan. So
what's
that's
a bathhouse? A house with a bath?
People go and like communally bathe together.
I don't feel like it needed that much explanation, did it?
No way.
A bathhouse?
No, I've never heard of that. Like a pool, like a swimming pool, but a warm bath, like a big hot tub.
Yeah, kind of.
Cool.
Yeah.
I look forward to coming along.
What is your, if you could design a dream building or project, what would it be?
I do actually really enjoy doing housing, to be fair. I think that's really cool to create communal spaces within the housing scheme. I think it's really fun. So maybe that.
What do you think is the best design building that you look at and go like that? It's just architecturally, that is just chef's kiss.
I've not actually been to see it, but I would really love to go and see the Sagrada Familia, the one in Spain.
The La Sagrada Familia.
There he is.
That's
so bad I
man.
can't even pronounce it.
No,
but anyway, because I've heard that it actually shows the gospel really well, which I thought was really cool.
Through architecture?
Cool.
Yeah, so I was like, that sounds pretty sick. So
Wow.
I'd love to probably see
because
something like that.
it's just constantly being building.
Yeah,
the work
it's like I've
happening.
been building for 100 years or something.
How is it linked to the gospel?
They've
Well, it's
got
a church.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a church.
A
Sorry, this
cathedral.
makes me sound silly this morning.
You're just
You're fine.
I didn't know. It's a Spanish word. Do you know what it
bathhouses.
Yes.
does Sagrada mean church?
I don't know.
I don't know. Someone could do that research.
Anyone who knows Spanish can tell us.
Yeah, please. Sorry. I feel so uneducated.
it's okay.
Great. Well, welcome to the Student Mission Podcast. We're so excited to get into it and find out a little bit more about all the different ways that you've been involved in mission. And we're here in Sheffield. This is your very own university city. And so we're excited to be here. But tell us a little bit about the picture of mission that you had as a child and what that looked like, and maybe how that kind of influenced your perspective on mission as well.
Yeah, so I grew up in a Christian home, and I like my childhood until I was 14. We lived in Luton, which is near Harpenden, where one of the YWAM, which is Youth with a Mission, bases is. And my parents were a part of that, like before they got married, and also a little bit when they were married. And I went to a very like Christian school, and not just like C of E Christian school. Like all the teachers were Christian. Everyone was Christian, basically. So I had a lot of impact in that way. And I just was at the Harpenden base like pretty regularly. And so I think like, yeah, with my parents' influence and also like just family, friends, a lot of them were missionaries as well. So just having those examples around me, I guess, like was very influential in my life. And it was just kind of normal to me, I guess, in a way, to go abroad, and also like just living a missional lifestyle in the UK as well. So
what were your parents doing? Were they traveling at different points? Were they doing some of the teaching? Were they out on the streets doing evangelism? What did that look like for them?
So they actually stepped back from YWAM when I was like younger, but just through their everyday jobs, like they also, so my dad was a teacher for a while of electrical engineering, and my mum taught English for a while, and they did like bits and bobs with YWAM in and out after that. But I think their main thing was like teaching English, and also just like through serving through church, and like I think they're just always super generous and super hospitable, and I think that's been like a massive thing for me, and like with neighbours and stuff, just how they've reached out to people, and when we'd like be at the beach or something, just like talking to people. I think and my mum would like just like people at the school gates and stuff, with my sister in particular, when we then moved to a different city, and she would be at a school that wasn't fully Christian, like chatting to people around that as well. So yeah,
that's great. You've grown up around mission in terms of what your parents did as part of YWAM, growing up near the base and stuff like that. But I suppose just because you've had that influence doesn't necessarily mean that as you grow up, that's going to be a part of your heart, but it has been. And so where did your own heart for mission, for evangelism, for sharing Jesus with other people come from? Is there a moment that it kind of clicked? Has it kind of been, a journey over time of what mission looks like for you? Where does your heart for mission come from?
Not a particular moment, but I think just like, I mean, in the Bible, it just says like, go and make disciples of all nations. And I think just like, I love to travel, and I love to see different cultures, and I'm half Egyptian as well. So I think like having that connection to a different culture as well makes a big difference. But I think like it's what Jesus said, and then having people my age as well, like wanting to do that with me, and like being like, oh, let's go like do these things. And I went on a couple mission trips growing up as well. I went to Greece and Moldova with YWAM, but like they're like younger missions experience, I guess. And I was there in both those places for 10 days on separate occasions. And I think just being given the opportunities to like try it and do evangelism basically was really cool. But it's interesting because, when you take those little quizzes that are like, oh, what's your spiritual gifting and stuff? Evangelism was always my bottom one when I was younger. Wow. So, and I was always like, oh, okay. But then I think just like gradually having more opportunities to like put it into practice and to like actually step out in boldness and having people around me encouraging me in that, and like, this is what we are called to do. I think that kind of sparked my journey.
Yeah, because I think it shows that, evangelism is an aspect of mission, and like, there are lots of different things. Like, hospitality can be evangelistic. That still like feeds into God's mission. So that's probably like quite a helpful way of being like, oh, okay, it's something broader than just, maybe the traditional stereotypical view
Yeah, no, for
of
sure.
evangelism. How did you find, obviously, so a lot of your experience of mission was, as you say, you went abroad, and there was a lot of stuff that I guess with YWAM that's a focus on like the nations as well.
Yeah.
How do you feel that sort of translates when it comes to like mission in kind of like your day-to-day life and where you're living?
I think from my experiences of going abroad, like sometimes, I don't know, and you're in that environment of like, I'm on a mission trip. So you're kind of in that mentality. So I think then bringing it back and being like, actually, it's not just that occasion that I'm supposed to be doing it, but also it is part of my everyday. And so just trying to bring it up, like if my friends have questions, like being able to just share what I think and making it seem normal, making it not seem like it's necessarily like this like big, like crazy thing that, I don't know, or like thing that I should shy away from sharing about, if that makes sense. And particularly with school friends, I think, not shoving it down their throats, but also being like, you guys need to know about this. And I think also just stepping out in boldness was like the biggest thing I took away from the mission trips, and just being able to like, the more you do it, the easier it becomes. Not that it is easy, like I get scared every single time, but like I think as soon as you do it like once on that occasion, like the Holy Spirit just speaks through you. And so just, I think the more you spend time with God anyway, like in your own personal time, in the secret place, if you will, the easier it is to then pour that out, because you're kind of so in tune with what God is saying to you, and then you're like asking for opportunities. But equally it's hard. So because you want to be open to what God is doing, but also sometimes then you're like, well, I've asked for it, so I actually need to do it then, if you get me. Yeah,
you've answered my prayer.
So now I actually need to do it.
Great.
Yeah.
That's mad. So what age are you when you're, traveling across the world and engaging in mission evangelism abroad? Is that age 13, 14?
Yeah, 14. I went to Greece, and then 16 when I went to Moldova.
Wow.
Those outreaches looked quite different. So in Greece, it was like a lot of prayer walking and street evangelism and working with refugees. Yeah, that was like very different versus in Moldova, we were helping at a kids camp. So it's just like, it was cool to see that you can share the gospel in different contexts and in different ways. Yeah, like you're doing dramas with kids and like actually like quite explicitly sharing the gospel. Whereas, with refugees and stuff, it's like you're helping, but also being able to like love on them and share and speak identity and speak life over them as well. Yeah, like we were just sorting out clothes to like give to the refugees and stuff. So that was really interesting. And a really eye-opening experience, I think.
Yeah. And then you went and did a gap year with YWAM just before you went to uni, is that right?
Yeah.
And what did that look like? What can you remember in terms of how that stretched you in regards to evangelism? What did you learn that you're like, oh wow, I've really learned this over this year, and this is where it's definitely stretched me in terms of what it looks like?
Yeah, I think so I did my DTS in discipleship training school
Thanks for the clarification.
Just
the jargon-free zone here.
For those that don't know, I went to Kona in Hawaii, which is one of their biggest like bases for the first 3 months, which they call lecture phase, and even that was like so stretching, because I think my DTS was 250 people, which like compared to my parents, that was like huge. That's like a conference every day sort of situation. And I wasn't really used to environments like that. I was very used to like everyone knowing me, like small environment, like that kind of thing. So I think that alone really pushed me out of my comfort zone and kind of prepared me for uni in a way of like, you're not going to know everyone. The tutors aren't going to know you that well personally, but like doesn't mean you can't like have an impact, and you can't still like you can still make a difference, and it's quality over quantity as well, friendship wise. But just being surrounded by all these people that are like so fiery and like wanting to share the gospel, I think really encourages you, because like it was challenging at times, because you're like, oh my gosh, am I doing enough? But then at the same time it was like, wow, like all these people are doing so much, and I want to be a part of that as well. So I think just like pushing me in that way. And then I went to Uganda for 2.5 months as my outreach. That was really stretching, not only like physically and because you're uncomfortable, it's not what you're used to, I guess, but just really relying on God's strength to sustain you, because you're like pouring out. So I think just like again coming back to that place with God every morning and with our team, like praying and stepping out in boldness for sure. People there, like they're very open to spirituality from my experience. Like, it's not necessarily like, do you believe in God, but like, which God do you believe in? Which spiritual thing do you want to like be a part of or have in your life? And so we'd have to say that we were born again, not just that we're Christians, because for them, they might be Christians. Yeah, it was like, do you actually have a relationship with God? Do you believe that Jesus died on the cross for you? Was a bit different. So yeah, and doing like door-to-door evangelism, I think just like, yeah, it's just very different to like doing it here. And I think it made me like really start to like kind of deconstruct how we do evangelism back in the UK versus like in Africa. And how, yeah, here like people often view Christianity as like almost like a political party, if you will, of like, oh, like I don't believe in the way that they do this and this and this. So I don't want that. Whereas actually it's like, meet Jesus first and then then we could talk about all the other bits, you know, because like, I mean, even in the church we all have different opinions on different things anyway, don't we? So yeah, so I think then coming to uni after that was like, I had kind of had that mentality of like, okay, how do I approach this with people, and just showing like their need for Jesus and meeting them where they're at, I guess.
That's so interesting how you'd had that experience of like, I guess, contextualizing things. Because obviously, if we believe the gospel is true at all times and every place, but it will resonate with different cultures differently. For instance, like the way you would do that, like door-to-door evangelism in Africa or abroad, is going to look very different to you sharing your faith here in the UK with like other students. But it's still at the heart, it's still the same gospel. So like, I guess having that mindset of, okay, how does this get expressed here in this context was probably like a really helpful mentality for you already to be aware of, rather than like, I can just copy and paste what I was doing in like Europe and Africa just to Sheffield and it'll be exactly the same.
No, not the same at all.
Was it strange coming from YWAM into uni? So you've kind of grown up in a Christian environment, you've been at a Christian school as well, you've been on mission trips, and then you've been part of YWAM abroad, which is very evangelistic and very missional, but you're also kind of surrounded by Christians all the time who are like encouraging one another. Was it strange? Was it difficult? Was it odd returning to the UK and then essentially being in a totally different environment at uni, where it's away from kind of maybe some of the more Christian bubble or the Christian feel of being on a missions trip and doing a gap year around that? Or was
I know a lot of people that like did YWAM and went to uni, and like it was like it like really set them up really well, and like spiritually I think it set me up great, but I found the beginning of uni like incredibly difficult. Like I would say I was really lonely, and just like mental health wise, like it wasn't great, and I think I just really struggled, and so I think really depending on God in that season was like really important, and then just figuring out like, what does God have for me while I'm here, and like what does he want me to like do and get involved in? And I think picking a church was super helpful, like from the get-go, of like finding that community, because I think being in YWAM and with 250 people, it was like you do go from like being with people every day, and I'm like an extreme extrovert, like love to be with people, like don't really love being on my own too much, to be honest. And so like I think coming to uni and like my parents dropped me off in my like room and then leave, and I'm like, oh, I'm like actually on my own now, it was really hard. So it was really important for me to then come and like find that community at church and really get stuck in like pretty quick. So but it was hard.
And so you've come back to the UK, you're getting involved in uni, you're kind of working out where your home is within the church, and then you kind of decide to start getting involved in mission in the UK, but also whilst you're at university, which is really exciting. And I think this is stuff that other students can be inspired by as they start to hear a little bit about the different missional ideas that you've been a part of and engaged with. What did that look like in your first year in terms of mission and that picture?
So I joined the CU, the Christian Union at Sheffield, and I think just getting to know people and like just seeing people's hearts for mission was really cool. But then the Asbury revival happened in February of my first year.
Oh, wow,
and like I was like reposting stuff on my Instagram story, just thought it was really cool, like what God was doing, and I think coming from YWAM as well, like and people like being like, God is doing so much, and like and stuff that was happening in Norway as well that was being mentioned in YWAM of like God is beginning to do stuff in the UK as well. In Europe, and then now in the UK as well, which is really cool. Yeah, so I was already like quite excited about like what that might look like anyway. And then seeing the Asbury revival, I literally posted on my story, and then this girl from the CU, who's now like one of my good friends, like replied, and she was like, oh, it'd be really cool if this was happening in Sheffield. I was like I'm already praying for it, like, you know,
why not?
Yeah. And then she was like, oh, it'd be really cool if we get together and just like pray about it. So we started to like sort that out, and then mentioned it to this other guy, and he was like, oh, I could play guitar for like a bit of worship for that if you want. And we were like, that'd be sick. Talked to my other friend, who's like now one of my best friends at uni and my housemate. And she was like, why don't we like make this like a thing? And then I was like, okay, so let's make this a thing. Yeah. So then there's the House of Prayer in Sheffield, and their like aim is to try and like have prayer in that building like 24/7, because they're part of 24/7 prayer. And like we had a connection with them, so we got in touch and we were like, hey, like, can we use your space like to pray and to worship for this city? And we wanted to do it in the night because like it says in Psalm 119, like to be God's watchman. And there's something really significant about like praying, particularly on Friday night when students are off going out, and like we're praying for the city and we're wanting to see God move in our city. People are only going to take action when they meet with Jesus. Yeah. So we wanted to create space for that. So we started this thing called Night Watch. And essentially we meet every couple months, and we've got worship happening from 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. Wow. With different people from different churches, mainly students, but young adults very welcome as well. Come and lead worship. And then we've got prayer stations as well, and then like snacks as well, so that people can, if you don't want to be in there for 6 hours, you can hop in and out. And you can come for
intercession is hungry work.
It is.
That's right.
It's
right.
So true. Yeah. And it's just been really like amazing to see how it just kind of came from this like little like idea, and now it's just like, like people just want to come and meet with Jesus, and to see all these students from different churches as well. Yeah. And like the unity of that, and to be able to share. And like we've had a couple of occasions where people have come up to me at the end and been like, oh, like my friend came that's not a Christian from like Frisbee, and we like had a conversation for like quite a while throughout it about what this is. And then people could hear us in the streets, and they like came and asked about what's happening. So I think like, it's not only a space for us to like just come in together and worship and pray for the city, but also like people are hearing about it as well.
It's really interesting that people would still feel like prompted to come and experience that as, you know, a night of prayer and worship. I guess that is something really experiential and isn't like maybe massively dissimilar from church, but it's not like a conventional church meeting, is it, that you're inviting people to? So, you know, it shows just how curious and hungry people are, that they're like, oh, well, what is this? There's something like laying people in even further into like what, you know, how intimate your relationship with Jesus is, and actually what your heart and conviction is for like seeing mission happen in this city. It was really cool.
And that was in your first year, and you're now in third year, and it's still going?
Still going
Strong. Amazing. And how often do you meet?
So first year, I think it was twice that we did it, and then last year 3 times, and this time we're going to try and do it 4 times.
Amazing. Yeah. That's so good. Yeah. So good. And exciting to be able to pioneer something that I think will leave a legacy as well. Like, I don't know what you're off doing next year, but if you're not in Sheffield, it feels like that's something that will continue on. And it also feels exciting to know that what as we did has had long-term effects across the world.
Sure. Yeah.
And wasn't just a flash in the pan. It's not like you're like, as we's happened, let's like pray a couple of times and then maybe we'll not meet again. It's like something long-term that's now gaining traction and has got roots and is something really substantial and regular happening in Sheffield to intercede for God to do something in this city and in this nation, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
No, it's been really cool.
Yeah. And so that was for a lot of your first year. What did second year then look like in terms of mission? Were you kind of like, I'll take my foot off the gas a little bit. We've set this thing up. That's going. I've got lots more exams to do and lots more work. I don't know if you have exams in architecture, but what did it look like in second year for you?
Yeah, I mean, Night Watch is still happening, which has been really cool. But yeah, I actually wasn't doing super great at the beginning of second year either, keeping the track record. Yeah, again, mental health was not great. And again, just like God was like, you're here and like, I want to use you anyway. And just, I think just opportunities to like serve in church was a massive thing. And through my small group as well, being really like willing to like give stuff a go and just like do missional things like we do. We've done Red Frogs, which is a Sheffield, well, I think it's around the country.
Australia and now Sheffield and lots of other places.
But like we did that as a small group, which was really cool.
What is Red Frogs for people who may not know?
So a pastoral like missional, well, I don't think they call themselves a missional organization.
No.
But they go into nightclubs and they hand out like bread sweets and also water, but they also have connections with student accommodations as well, so that they actually build relationships with like students around the campus and around Sheffield, which is really cool. So we've done that, but then also just being involved with stuff with the Send has been really cool. So for those that don't know,
please explain.
The Send is a catalytic movement to try and mobilize this generation of Christians to go out and be bold in sharing the gospel where God has placed them, and then potentially the nations as well. So that's been really cool, something that started in the States and is kind of in many different places around the world now. And so that's been starting up in the UK. And I've been a part of something that they're calling Spotfires, which is like small groups meeting together, again, to pray and worship for the city, but also to take action and to actually go and share the gospel. So yeah, we've been meeting like since the end of my first year, but it's kind of become like a Spotfire like more recently. And we meet once a month and we eat together, pray and worship. And then once a month on a Saturday, we go out and we just go and ask if we can pray for people, which is really cool. Wow. Cool. And I went to a young adults gathering in January with part of the Send this year even, 2024. And as part of that, it was again just loads of people from different places around the UK, really fiery for what God is doing and really excited. And after that, like heard lots of stories about people like just sharing the gospel and what like God was doing in their places. Then I saw on Instagram this girl, Trinity Joy Queen, if you want to give her a follow. And she has been trying to share the gospel with someone every day for 365 days. Wow. And I'd been like following that like throughout January and like still am kind of. And yeah, I was just like really inspired. I was like, that's so cool. Like just to have that boldness to go up to like literally anyone and just like go and chat to them about Jesus. I was like, that'd be fun. Like, let's give that a go. So I decided over Lent to like make that my Lent thing, take up something instead of give something up. And yeah, so I just did that over Lent, just tried to share the gospel.
That's amazing.
With
so you spent
over Lent.
40 days in a row talking to people about Jesus.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
That was the plan.
That's amazing. Amazing.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, because obviously, as you said, like Lent is typically something to like let go of something or to like refrain from doing, but to kind of, I guess, using that as an action point, like what am I intentionally going to do for 40 days in a row to like build a habit?
I think in a way you kind of are giving something up because you're giving up your time, I guess, to be able to do it. And
that's a great point.
I think like, but it was definitely like taking up something to be able to do that. But
and I guess your comfort as well.
Yeah. Like
convenience and ease.
And just going up to people, like it makes your mindset like shift, I think, throughout the day. Like those 40 days, even when I was still kind of struggling at that point in the year, like I wasn't thinking about myself as much because I was constantly trying to think like, oh God, like who do you want me to talk to today? Or yeah, your mentality kind of changes a bit, I guess. And it makes you see the bigger picture a bit more rather than just what's going on in Natalie's world, I guess, if that makes sense. Yeah.
And are there any stories that stand out from either the 40 days of Lent or the stuff you've been doing with the Send or Night Watch that you're kind of like, wow, it was amazing that I had that conversation with that person, or I was able to pray for that person, or that person came along to this?
Yeah, one time it was in our CU events week. I hadn't shared the gospel with someone yet that day, and it was like 9 p.m. but I had like a deadline that week or something, and So I went to the library, and then I left the library at like 11, still hadn't shared the gospel with anyone. And I was like, oh, I need to do that. So I'm like walking out, and there was a guy kind of like a bit ahead of me. And so I was like, oh, like, should I like go up to him? I'm not sure. But then he was like quite far ahead. So I was like, it might be a little bit awkward if I like jump him like that.
Yeah.
Just like go up to him.
Yeah, stalking him down the
corridor. Yeah, I was
corridor.
like, maybe not.
Late at night.
But anyway, so I go outside, and he like stopped to take a picture of this tree. So I was like, oh, okay, well, now I could maybe go in. Like it's not as bad now. So I just like go, and I'm like, hey, like for Lent, like I'm just trying to pray for someone every day. And because I'm a Christian and I believe in Jesus and the power of prayer. So I just wondered if you'd like prayer for anything. And then he didn't even answer the question. He just immediately goes into this like spiel about Christianity and like his thoughts on it, and like his journey with faith, and trying out different religions and stuff. Wow. And we ended up standing outside the library for like 2 hours, just chatting about faith.
Wow.
And yeah, and he actually knew this guy that I know from my small group as well at church. And so he's like had conversations about that before. And I was able to get his Instagram and invite him to one of the events that happened later in CU that week. And he came along. So that was really cool.
Yeah.
Just being able, like seeing that people are really open to it, and so, like people are having thoughts about it was really cool. And even like the security guard in the students' union as well. One time, like after CU, just chatting to him as well, and how different people were feeding into his life as well. And I mean, ultimately he was like, I think like I'll get there one day, but not now. But the fact he was willing to have a conversation about it and see that people are passionate about it was really cool.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It is amazing how open students and young adults seem to be. Of chatting about Jesus. And I remember I had a conversation with one person, and sometimes it's hard when people are so open and accepting, because I found that someone was like, oh, you love Jesus, that's great, I love crystals, good for me, good for you. And I was trying to convince them of the need for Jesus, but it was almost like they're like, no, you've got what you've got, I've got what I've got, it works for me, it works for you. And so it's lovely that people can be so accepting, but it can sometimes be hard when people are so stuck in the kind of spirituality that they've found as well. But I think, especially from stuff that we've been doing with the Fusion Survey and chatting to students on campus, that there just is a spiritual openness and a curiosity. And whether that's manifesting or crystals or witchcraft, it seems to be just very common amongst this generation. Yeah. And it, I think, gives us such a key opportunity to be able to tell them about Jesus, the way, the truth, and the life, and to direct them to a form of spirituality that is light and isn't darkness. And I think that's almost a key responsibility for us as disciples of Jesus, to introduce students to the light of the world and invite them to church, invite them to know Jesus, which I think, there's an excitement to it. There's also kind of like urgency to it, I suppose, of a generation that are really open and need to know more of who Jesus is.
Yeah. Totally. And with doing those 40 days, how were you kind of approaching it day to day? Did it look the same every day, or did it like really vary in how you went about it?
I tried to like go up to someone random every day. Like it wasn't someone that I would usually bump into. I tried to like go up to a stranger, I guess. And not necessarily the same time, but it did often end up being quite late at night. And there was occasions where I was fully in my pajamas and I still hadn't done it. And I was like, no, I've got to go. So I'd walk up to the little co-op like near our house and just like wander around there, just see who I felt God would be like, yeah, go up to them. So yeah, and I think I would usually just go in with like, hey, I'm going around praying for people. And I just wondered if you'd like prayer for anything. And sometimes that would lead to a conversation about faith. Sometimes it wouldn't. And occasionally I would ask, like, have you ever considered like coming to church before? Or what are your thoughts on Christianity? And again, sometimes led to conversations. Sometimes people were like, no thanks, not interested. And I have had occasions where this wasn't in the 40 days, but like one time I was with this girl doing street evangelism, and we went up to this lady and she was like, we're like, oh, hey, do you have a second just to chat? And she was like, oh yeah, are you guys all right? Like, are you okay? And we're like, yeah, like we're Christians, like we believe in Jesus, we believe in the power of prayer. We just wondered if we could pray for you. And she was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, I actually really need to get back to work. It's just like complete like switch off immediately. So I think you really meet a range of people.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I think just like, just going up to them and asking if they'd like prayer.
Yeah, that's really interesting that, you know, you were just being upfront. You're being like, this is what I'm doing. You weren't trying to like segue in and try and like warm people up to the idea. But like, no, this is what I'm here to do. And people responded, as you say, a variety of responses. What was the hardest thing doing that for 40 days in a row? Like, because I guess with Lent, I think I've only really properly done Lent once, where I went vegetarian for 40 days. And like, and that's hard though, that consistency, right? Doing every day. So that, for me, that's the hardest thing of trying to do something daily. But yeah, for you, what was like the hardest part of doing something that consistently? As you say, there was sometimes like, oh, I still want to like get it done, and you're now like, right, co-op's still open.
Let's go. I think the consistency and like actually making it not just something that I needed to tick off. I think at the beginning it definitely starts as like this thing of like, it's really exciting, like I really want to like make sure that like this is part of my everyday. But then towards the end, I think it definitely got harder, and like the last like week or so was at home, and so that was actually a lot harder because I don't live in like a student city at all, and so if I left it like late in the day, it would get harder to go and like speak to people. So I think just like the intentionality of it, I think, was probably the hardest, and making sure that I was being intentional about going up to people. Also sometimes like just getting the courage to do it, because sometimes it is like, oh, what are they going to say? Like it's a bit scary sometimes.
Yeah. How did you motivate yourself to do that for 40 days? Because if I was in your shoes, we've maybe done 2 weeks. And then I've probably, as you say, gone home for Easter, maybe been like, I did well, I did a fortnight. But like, how did you to have the kind of perseverance to do that every day? Because I guess with sharing faith, it's kind of like with other disciplines, right? You want to build that consistency in, but that requires you making a habit, which requires like a certain level of motivation until it's just normal. Mm-hmm. So how did you kind of, how did you push through those moments where you were like, the energy level or the conviction level is low?
I guess just kind of being like, I've committed to do this for the 40 days and I want to do it for the 40 days. I think I had people around me that were encouraging me in it as well, which makes a massive difference. Like my mum or my dad, or like just on the phone, or like just even my housemates being like, oh, have you like done it today? Like, how's it gone? And like, I don't know, just people encouraging you just makes a big difference, I think. And
that's cool, inviting other people into it, not just for the accountability side, but encouragement. Because I think sometimes when you do something like that, it could be like, that's Natalie's little project for the year. Like, but actually bringing people in to it and inviting them into what you're wanting to do to help see God move in and through you is really important.
No, I think it does make a big difference, and it just spurs you on, I guess.
I've been encouraged by the different styles of mission that you're kind of involved in. So Night Watch is about intercession. It's about praying for a move of God. And then you've got Spotfires. Spotfires, which is, okay, we're coming together, but we're also intentionally, we're going out, we're talking to strangers on the street. You've got your own personal thing that you're doing as part of Lent. And then also you've been abroad and you've been overseas and you've been helping with refugees and you've been helping at kids camp. And I think it is amazing how broad mission can be. And I think as different people listen to this, hopefully there's different parts of mission that they're like, oh, actually, I'd like to give that a go, or I'd like to try that, or that's something that I'm quite interested in. And I think hopefully it inspires those listening to engage in mission where they are and try things and get excited about the prospect of people coming to know Jesus through the conversations that you're having, or through acts of service, or through the prayer that's being prayed over different cities. What would you say to a student or a young person who's listening who wants to get involved in mission? What advice would you give them?
Just spend time with God. Ask him, what do you want me to do? How do you want me to pour into this city that you've placed me in? Like, I always come back to that verse in Esther of like, you were made for such a time as this. And like, God just wanting you to pour into wherever he's placed you. But also like, I think the biggest thing for me was like the community that I'm doing it with, and having like my housemate being there, like, let's do this, let's make this happen. Like, you've got the vision and the making it happen that kind of go hand in hand. And so I think, yeah, just having people around, like finding those people that are like, yeah, like, let's do what God wants us to do in this city, and just going for it. So yeah, being part of, yeah, community, and just spend time with him. And if it is just going out on the streets by yourself, like, give it a go. Like, do you know what I mean? Yeah.
And so in your first year, you're getting involved in night watch stuff. Second year is Spotfire and evangelism on the streets. Third year, you're kind of in your final year now. Anything new, anything creative? Or you kind of like, we're investing in the things that are already kind of up and going?
Investing, but also, over the summer, me and my friend went to the Fusion conference.
Oh, bit of a plug.
We'll take those.
Lit time. Really good. And we heard about Loughborough Truth, which is something I'm doing in Loughborough, where you go out on the streets and ask questions, like the Way UK. And me and my friend were like, that would be really cool and a good way to like do evangelism, especially like where people do find it really scary. It's like a way of like going up to someone with a purpose, and not necessarily like, hey, like, can I pray for you? You know, it's like more of like a conversation, and then you can usually like have great conversations with people. So we prayed about it, and then we were like, like, we could do that. So we came back, and in Freshers Week, we just gathered some people that we thought would be keen to get involved and set up Sheffield Truth.
Amazing.
And it's been really cool. We've only gone out twice so far, but just like, again, seeing people open to have conversations and hear what other people are thinking as well. So that then, like, we can then share what we think
how
with them
people
as well.
responded to being interviewed.
Yeah,
Which I
most of
imagine
them.
it's quite disarming being asked a question about faith, and they're like, "Oh, okay."
I mean, we tried to say it like at the beginning, be like, "Oh, this is a faith-based thing, if that's okay." And actually, it was often
Good
the
practice.
people that like had different religions were often quite happy to talk about their faith and their religion. So I think that was like, it's quite eye-opening for yourselves as well, because it means that you kind of hear what is that person speaking about, and what do they think, and then you can kind of think about how you share Jesus with them, because based on what they already know and that kind of thing. So it's been really cool.
So those videos for Instagram, TikTok,
Instagram,
YouTube Shorts.
all the things now, isn't it? It's
Instagram.
crazy. Instagram at the moment. Sheffield Truth.
Give it a follow.
Simple.
Have there been any like standout conversations, or like things where like that seems to have really landed with the person you've been chatting to, or like anything that's happened off the back of one of those vox pop type things?
I think just like the conversations we've had with people, like we've spoken to a Hindu and a Sikh and Muslim, and to hear all of them saying that they've got a relationship with God has been really interesting. And like how we then share about how Jesus plays a part in that, and like I think those are the conversations that I've like really been like taken back by, because I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't know that you thought like that, so how do I like now approach that? So that's been really interesting. And the time when I went out, one of the questions was, how do we like, if you could ask a Christian any question, what would it be? And so then it's a good conversation starter, because then you can be like, oh, well, like, can we answer your question? So I think just being able to like hear people's thoughts on that, and then be able to respond. And then I actually saw someone that we interviewed at an event a couple of weeks later, and was able to be like, like, how are you doing? And he was like, oh, did you get many other interviews? And just have a bit of a conversation about like why we were doing it a bit more, which was really cool. So
it's cool that provoked that someone will come along and check something out. And I think that's a great question to ask. Is there anything you'd want to ask a Christian? Or I was saying to friends, is there anything you want to ask me as a Christian? Because I think a lot of our friends are probably, they've got loads of things they want to ask, but they may feel like, oh, perhaps that some people will just ask it because that's their personality. But others are maybe like, oh, I really want to understand, and I'm really curious about this, but I don't want to broach it because they may feel like they're being insensitive, or somehow it's out of turn. And so actually giving people that permission, like, because I think sometimes we think they don't want to know about what we're doing. So I think that's a great way of approaching it.
I also think that is fascinating, that different religions would still say they have a relationship with God? Because I think sometimes we're like, Christianity is about relationship and all others are about religion, and that's what's unique about Christianity. But it is fascinating.
That was really surprising.
They would still say that they have a relationship with God, and I guess for us that's where talking about Jesus and what he did and on the cross, and then being able to have this relationship through the cross is, I guess, where we can present that unique story of how Christianity differs from other religions in a way. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I kind of like pick up on what Maz was just saying. So you've obviously done loads of different types of mission, in a variety of ways, drawing on community. How have you kind of changed in your faith by doing that? And how do you think, through your uni experience, how that's changed how the way you'll do mission going forwards?
I think I've definitely got more bold with doing it. I don't know, just being with people, like, it just like encourages me, and like hearing about what other people are doing abroad, and like and here as well, like it just excites me and just like stirs something in my heart to like, I want to do that as well. Boldness in going up to people, but also like I think I'd like to further like building relationships with people, maybe like in the workplace next year, like what that will look like, to share my faith like with them. And like going to a new city, like what will that look like, and finding the community where I can get stuck in and find the people that are also like, oh, let's do something about what God's doing here. So I guess, just taking that forward of like, being bold and stepping out into where God calls.
That's great.
That makes sense.
Amazing. Yeah. And it's been great to hear your story and just the ways that you've grown in mission from like childhood, age 14, age 15, coming to uni and going off into the workplace next year, and a whole different ball game in terms of what mission looks like, and as you build relationships with colleagues and have that for the first time. And it feels quite exciting to know that you're going out into the world and being a disciple and sharing the gospel in those places just as much as at university and on the streets and things like that. So I think that's inspiring and really exciting to know that mission is still just such a key part of your life. And even though you wouldn't call yourself an evangelist, you say that's at the very bottom. Just hearing about all those stories is hopefully inspiration to people who also wouldn't call themselves evangelists, but realize that actually you can stretch yourself and you can step out and you can grow in courage. And just like you can grow to become someone who grows in confidence in what it means to share their faith with other people. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And we wish you all the best for the future, and look forward to hearing all the stories of what God continues to do in and through you.
Thanks for having me.
No problem.
Thanks, Natalie. And that was our conversation with Natalie Youssef. That was such a great chat and really encouraging to hear about all the different ways she's engaged with mission. And I was particularly challenged by how she did that Lent of sharing Jesus with someone new every single day for Lent. I may do that for Lent this year.
Yeah, it's a good plan, isn't it? And I love that she was also inspired by someone else who, I think she mentioned someone on Instagram that she'd been watching who was doing something similar. And I do think there are loads of ideas out there of what mission could look like. So it's worth thinking about that for ourselves and how can we engage in mission in the short term, but also what long-term things are we doing? So she did Lent, but she's also investing in the night watch prayer that's happening 2 or 3 times a year. But amazing to chat to her and amazing to hear the stories of how she's engaging in mission. And it's exciting to know that she's going off into the workplace and keen to engage in mission in that way as well.
Yeah, and I think what really came through in our chat with her was about how thinking through how mission is applied in different contexts. So what does it look like when you're doing mission abroad, or what does it look like when you're just doing mission out on the streets or with your friends here in your uni town or city, and then thinking through, what does it look like in the workplace? So thinking about our context is really important as well.
Definitely.
And so now we're going to share some stories about what God has been doing recently with students across the country in different towns and cities. These are stories that are on our blog, but also stories that we've heard from partners that we're working with across the UK. So I've got a story here from Fabric Church in Manchester. They are a church plant that have been going for roughly a year now. So this is a story from one of their Freshers Week activities that they were doing. So they gave away 600 potted plants to students, which are there. So everyone loves a potted plant.
They do. They really
Everyone
do.
loves a succulent, cactus, aloe vera, whatever it may be. But all these plant pots came with QR codes on them that would take them to events that they were running at the church. And one of these events was called Pints and Paints. And this was an alpha launch promo event. So they had this huge garage downstairs in the church, and they opened up the shutter to the street. And they weren't sure how many people were going to rock up, but they were pleasantly surprised when 160 people turned up, most of which were freshers students from the university. There were so many people that they actually ran out of supplies. So people had to sit on the curb on the sides of the road because there was just no space in the church. There were so many people there than they had anticipated, and loads of them started coming back to Alpha regularly as a result, which is amazing. That obviously you get like a potted plant, which is a lovely gift.
Clever idea.
Yeah,
So
a token
good.
of God's love. And then the QR code, genius as
Great
well.
follow-up.
Linking to an event.
Brilliant.
People we know are just curious at the moment, that are open to exploring faith. And there you go. They've got an overflowing
good.
event.
Yeah.
We've also got some other stories as well from St. Thomas in Newcastle. So we heard this from Josh, the student worker there. So each year for freshers, they hand out pizza slices. They have a pizza oven, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And then they just spend Freshers Week just handing out pizza slices. And I think this year they handed out over 3,500 pizza slices. And they often had a queue of at least 60 to 70 students waiting for pizza. And they've got some cool stories that they've heard through their Freshers season. So I think at the end of last year, so the 23-24 academic year, one of their students had shared the gospel with a mate at a house party. And over the summer, this friend went away and read the Bible off his own back and became a Christian.
Wow.
He became a Christian. And then he came back to Newcastle like a couple of weeks before term started and told his friend that this has happened. And then a few weeks after that, they baptized him as well.
Amazing.
So that was just one
Wow.
conversation had with a friend, shared the gospel. Then, speaking, seeds were sown, and then they come and found faith, and now they're baptized.
Amazing.
They also met in the queue for pizza a student who was Hindu, who said she couldn't go to church because of her background. However, she came along one Sunday morning, and the vicar was preaching on Jesus being the gate. And this student was in tears throughout the service, and she asked the vicar at the end, "Is this true? Because if so, it's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." And we think that after that, she had a really powerful encounter with the Holy Spirit, which is amazing. And then also a couple of years ago, so this is tracking back, there was a student who got pizza from the pizza oven queue that they were doing, and the team at St. Thomas had a chat with her about faith and church, but this student hadn't engaged off the back of it. However, this student's in her final year, and she walked past the pizza oven queue again and was reminded of that conversation she'd had. And then her and her housemates, who are also on church, have been coming along to church on the recent Sundays. So some really encouraging stuff happening at St. Thomas, Newcastle. One more story that I've got, and this is from a student in Southampton, and who is a real evangelist and who consistently talks to her friends about Jesus. So one evening recently in October, she went to the Hobbit, a pub in Southampton, with two of her friends. And as she went to go and get her drinks, her two friends started chatting to each other about faith off their own back. So when this student, who's a Christian, returned to sit down with the drinks at the table, the two friends asked whether they could talk about faith with her. What an opportunity.
Yeah.
Open goal. So the first friend was raised as a Buddhist, but spoke about how recently her dad had become a Christian. And she believed Jesus was a real person, that he was true, and that what he said she could believe. And the other friend was brought up in the Philippines and had a loose connection to Christianity, but never had accepted Jesus as her Lord and Savior. So through this conversation, this Christian student at Southampton was able to witness to both of those friends and led them to Jesus. So she invited those two girls into the pub toilet and asked them to pray a salvation prayer with her. And it says it was only a quick one, but the two friends, through teary eyes at the end, exclaimed, "Thank you, Jesus."
Wow.
And so the student has now ordered some Bibles for them from our website so she can read the Bible with them and start discipling them. So loads of great stories of what's happening in the Freshers season at unis at the moment, and just shows that God is just moving.
Yeah.
He's just doing stuff in people's hearts, and some people just get to be there to lead them to Jesus.
Yeah.
It's really encouraging.
Yeah. And what a privilege to hear so many amazing and brilliant stories. I feel like I'm surprised every single time, and I shouldn't be, because God is on the move and there are stories left, right and centre, but it is just amazing every time. I think it raises our expectations of what God can do, and it opens our minds to all the things that God's doing across the country.
It's so encouraging. And if you have a story of sharing faith, of doing mission, or just something really cool that's happening at your uni, in your context, we'd love to hear it. So please do email us, hello@fusionmovement.org, or just DM us on Instagram @HelloFusionMovement, because we'd love to hear stories of what is happening. But that's all we have time for this episode. So we'll catch you guys next time.